Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the Dungeon Dive, we are going to be taking a look at 5 things about Dark Venture, Battle of the Ancients. This is, of course, the new game in the Dark Venture world from Gilded Skull Games, and I was supplied this copy as a review copy, so thank you, Robert. So I have taken a look at this game before. I have 2 videos. I have an older video about the prototype and then a video about a month ago unboxing all of the production copies. So I'm not going to go really in depth into what you get with the game. If you want to see everything that you get with the game, watch my last video. In this video, we're just going to be covering 5 topics. I'm not going to call this a review because I don't think I have played enough to call this a review. I think this game needs quite a bit of time on the table before somebody could properly review it, just because there's so much going on. But I think I have a good enough grasp on the game to talk intelligently about, and I have experienced enough of it to kind of give you a flavor of what is going on. So the first thing, well, let's talk about this first. How have I experienced the game so far? I've played 2 of the narrative scenarios, and in the base book, the base book has about 13 or so narrative scenarios to play through. So I've played through 2 of those. I have played through the main adventure mode, and that is what you are seeing right now set up. I am playing the adventure mode I am playing the Dargon, and I am playing against the Bowmerk and the Alder King. I have played a custom adventure mode called the Will of the Ancients, and this is something that is super cool, and we will talk a little bit about the Will of the Ancients and those they're more like random adventure mode, which is really cool. And then I have also played a victory game, which is just a competitive game with one faction against the other. So I've played a handful of games. So let's first do a little overview of the adventure game, because I think this is a mode that will that will appeal to viewers of the Dungeon Dive who maybe aren't so much into skirmish games, but are more into adventure style or dungeon crawl style games. So I have the game set up right now with one of the expansions, and I am playing with the Merchant. And the Merchant is from the Beasts and Eggmen expansion. So there are 2 expansions for the game. There is the Kings and Heroes expansion, and there is the Beasts and Eggman expansion. We've taken a look at those in detail in the unboxing video. So if you want to see everything you get in those, watch that. So the Merchant is an interesting element that you can add to just about any game that you want to play. And he is a merchant. He is a seller of cool items, and the Merchant has his own deck of items, all kinds of neat things, cool weapons, mercenaries that you can hire, different kinds of potions, different kinds of things, armor and stuff that you can equip, different heroes that you can hire to help you. So all kinds of neat things that you can buy from the Merchant to help your faction out. Right now, there is a Celestite Warden. This is a mercenary that I can hire. And if I spend enough dice, then I can hire this mercenary and he will help me out on my game. I can also get Bretta's Blade here. Bretta is Princess Bretta is actually one of the heroes that you can play. So there's her sword there. And then we also have Hordrick's Falcon, which is a weapon there. And right now, one of my Dargon is armed with Hodrick's Axe. And Hodrick's Axe gives me bonuses to my attack and defense. And when you buy a weapon and when you equip an item to a unit, you take a matching token. So this is number 2 there. And then my unit also has the number 2 on top of it. So that is showing that he is armed with that. So that is the one little kind of expansion thing that I am playing with. So I am playing with the Dargon. The tribes of Dargon are led by elders. When an elder dies, another is grown to take their place. After harvesting ample resources, the Dargon are able to produce eggs which hatch into more of their kind. The Dargon are an interesting faction. Basically, you want to go around the board and you want to collect resources, and then you want to spend those resources to produce these eggs, and then these eggs become the warriors. Basically, you only have 2 units in the game, 2 standard units. You have your eggs, which can't even move or attack. All they can do is defend. And then you have these soldier units. And each unit has a strength value and a defense value, an S value and a D value. The strength value is how many dice you roll when you attack. The defense value is how many dice you roll when you defend. You can stack units on a square, and that will allow you to combine those totals when you make an attack or when you are attacked. And then the Dargon also have the elders, and the elders are S2D3s. You can only ever have one of these out on the board at one time. If your elder ever dies, then one of your soldiers can become an egg, and then the next turn, that egg can turn into an elder. But I'm having a pretty difficult time with this faction, mainly because of how the gathering works. You need to gather resources in order to produce eggs. But gathering resources is a random die roll. You have a 50-50 chance of gathering the resource you're trying to get. And so you can just have bad luck and not be able to get resources. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But in this game, I am playing against the Bowmerk. And the Bowmerk are amorphous creatures with partially gelatinous bodies that can shapeshift into various configurations at will. They're kind of like the Blob. They start out pretty weak, but they come out, they can start multiplying, and they can produce these strong S3, D3 creatures, and then those can split off and they can combine, and they multiply pretty quickly. So right now the Bowmerk are out here on the map in the southeast quadrant, and then up here they're in the northwest quadrant, and they are moving in on my Dargon. And then you always play the adventure mode with the Elder King, and he's kind of like the main big bad guy. And he always is joined by his hero, Delok. And their main thing is they can produce this fabricator that allows them to basically clone other units from other factions. When you start in adventure mode, though, your the Elder King and Delok are not on the map. They come out later. So when you set up the adventure mode, you're going to put these tokens out, these adventure tokens. You're going to put them at quadrants. So you might put one at N9 here. And then when one of the player-controlled units crosses over that action token, then you look up the quadrants in the book, in the storybook, and then you read that. And then sometimes those will trigger other action tokens to appear other places on the board. Sometimes certain action tokens with numbers will be shuffled in, and you will be searching for certain numbers. And as the game progresses, the action tokens are going to be moving around, and those are like little quests that you want to move towards in order to figure out the story of the game. And each of the different factions has a few different action or story tokens on the board that are more apt to them, that are more about that faction. So right now, my Dargon started in this like cave thing, and the Dargon are kind of like these aliens, and they know about technology. And there was this machine here in the cave, and I was able to repair it. And then now I can use this machine. This machine has 4 functions that only the Dargon can use. Other factions can use one of the functions, but I have full control over this machine. And one of the things I can do is I can teleport these item tokens into this cave for me to retrieve them pretty easily. I don't have to go out onto the board and search for these items. I can teleport them directly to me. That is super cool. Another token you're going to put out on the board are these action card tokens. And when you move on one of those, then you get to draw one of the action cards. And these action cards are various things that you get to do. You can spend these cards to take more turns, to kind of to bolster an attack to make your defense more powerful. These are all just kind of discoveries and tactics and different ways to help you kind of break the rules, mitigate your luck, and that kind of thing. The item cards here, those represent this item deck. And then there are a ton of different items. Again, there are also allies that you can find. There are potions, there are weapons, there are traps, there are some things that can hurt you in here. But the item deck is super cool. There are all kinds of neat things to find and discover. So yeah, so right now, basically my Dargon are kind of trying to gather resources to grow some eggs. They are manipulating this machine to get items. And like my hero dude right here, he is out armed with his Hordrix axe. And he is moving into the Ominous Tower dungeon to try to collect some of these story tokens. Each of the adventure modes and each of the expansions also comes with an adventure book. An adventure mode has 3 different ways to play. Right now, I am playing the exploration session, and to win the exploration session, I need to discover 8 of these story points. And so I have 2 right now, so I'm kind of moving into that one. So let's talk real quickly about how you play the game. The first thing you're going to do on your turn, actually, let's back up. I have this guy. It came out from, I think, the item deck. Yeah, it's a Quackalope. And this is a kind of crazy bird thing. And he is a neutral faction. He's a beast. But what he does is at the start of every turn, I roll a d6 and then I will move him somewhere else on the board. And every time he moves, he drops an egg in his place. So right now there are 2 eggs on the board. And these eggs are kind of like grenades. So a unit can move on this egg and pick it up, and then you can discard it to add 3 to an attack. So let's see where the Quackalope is going to move. 2. Quackalope is going to move it to J13. All right, so he's already on J13, so he is not going to move, and he is not going to deposit another egg. So the Quackalope is just going to stay there. Okay, so the first thing you do on a turn is you will roll your 6 action dice. I'm going to roll those off camera, and then I will move them on camera here. Okay, so we have lots of movement. So on your action dice, you have orthogonal movement, you have diagonal movement, and you have skulls. And you also have 2 orthogonal movements. Skulls you can't move, but skulls can be spent for other things. What was this? I forgot what this was. I'm just going to say this was a orthogonal movement. So what do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 orthogonal movements and 2 diagonal movements. So now we can spend those to do things with our units. I want to move this unit in here on this action token there so I can experience more of the story, more of the quest. So I'll spend 1 of these to move him here. And this was at G6. So now we go to our book here and we look up G6. So there might be a slight spoiler here. This will be the only one that I read on the video today. G6 just says remove the event token on F8 and then read F8. This counts as activating 1 event, not 2. Okay, so F8 is here. Okay, so we're going to remove that. That counts as activating 1. And then we are also going to remove that and then read F8. So I will read F8 off camera. I don't want to give away too much of the spoilers in this section because this section is kind of all about discovery. So now I would continue to move. I could continue to move here for an action die, and then I could take an action to draw an action card. And then this card is a discovery, new stock. Move the card on Darwin. So this is the merchant. So this causes his items to cycle through. So that's how you can get new items out. So that's one of the things that you could do. This is an instant action. It happens right away, and then you discard that. And then other things can happen too. You can move around. You could spend action dice to gather resources. So maybe I want to gather some resources in here. There is some wood on one of these spaces. So I could spend 1 movement die to gather some resources. And when you gather resources, you roll on a 2, 4, or 6, you gain the gathered resource. 4. Okay, so this unit here would also gain some wood. And I need 4 of these main resources in order to hatch an egg. So then you would continue to spend your action dice. And then after you have spent all of your action dice, then the AI controlled enemies go. And each faction has its own enemy AI deck, their auto enemy action. And this is great. So much effort and work was put into making this game a viable solo and co-op game. So because each of the different factions has a different enemy AI deck, you really do feel like you are playing against a customized faction that feels different. It maintains the asymmetrical things that make this game so interesting. So on the enemy turn, you would work through each one of these cards and doing whatever you can on the card. The Bowmerk, they start by building up. For each Bowmerk on the board, you're going to roll a d6. On a 5 or higher, they bolster themselves. They become stronger. And then they move. And AI enemies, they always move towards units that have taken a movement. So none of these dudes in the cave here, they didn't move at all, but this guy over here moved, so he is going to be the target. So all of the Bowmerk are going to slowly start moving towards him. So you can manipulate the AI by having by keeping certain units of your own faction, keeping them still and not moving, and maybe moving one of your units that is far away in order to manipulate the AI to pull them somewhere else. Another thing that I did at the very, very beginning of one of my turns is I built a wall. So the Dargons, they can build walls. So I built a wall so it would make it harder for the Bowmerk to come in to pincer me. You know, they could come in from this side and from this side, and they could trap me in this cave. And I'm trying to use this cave as kind of like my home base. So I'm trying to fortify it and make it more defensible there. But then, so after the enemy AI is going to move, if the enemy AI, if a unit comes in contact with any of your faction, then they are going to do combat. And then each of the factions will have a combat resolution. The Bowmerk are trying to absorb items and absorb enemy factions so they can continue to grow. Then they're going to draw cards, and as they draw cards, they will discard a certain number, and then they can roll to see if more units come out. They, again, will have another chance to increase in number. You might be able to spawn your Ancient. The Ancients are big units, and each faction has its own big unit that can come out. They're super strong, and they give you a special ability that you can do when your Ancient is out. And after you've moved through all of the cards in the auto enemy deck, then you move on to any other factions that are on the board controlled by enemies or controlled by auto enemies. And then you go back to your turn and rinse and repeat. And I've had a blast playing this game so far. Okay, so let's go on to point number 2. Point number 2 is the sheer number of options. This game is overflowing with options, especially when you start adding in the 2 expansions. I'm going to make a mess of this board now. That is okay. I can reset this up later. But, okay, so you have 5 factions in the base game. You have the Dargon, you have the Bowmerk, you have the Alderkang, and you have the Orprul and the Varpin. So far, I have played as the Dargon, I have played as the Bowmerk, I have played against the Alderkang, and I have played against the Bowmerk. I have played as the Dargon, I have played as the Varp and the Varpin. So far, the Varpin are my favorite. They're very simple. They only have a few number of units out on the board, but they can quickly grow in strength. So they can very quickly move from an S1D1 up to an S1D2, S2D1, S2D2, and S3D3. So they are all about small numbers, but very, very strong units. And I really like this faction. It's been a lot of fun. The Dargon I'm struggling with because of that gathering resources. It's right now for me, it's too random. I haven't quite figured out how to play the Dargon. The Orpal, I have not played against, or I have not played them yet, but they have a bag and you draw tokens out of a bag. They are summoning in their units from other places using these rift crystals. And then you also have in the factions from the expansion, you have the Eggmen. The Eggmen seem really, really neat. I cannot wait to play them. I think I'm going to play them next. They can create an Eggman wizard who has these magical spells. These guys are pretty cool. The beasts are all of the monsters of the world of Dark Range. So a lot of the beasts, if you've played Dark Venture, you will recognize them as some of the monsters you fought. So when you are playing the beasts, you are kind of playing the hostile natural world of Dark Range, and that is really, really neat. I like that idea a lot. And then finally here we have the Kingsguard. And the Kingsguard are an interesting faction. So the Kingsguard have their own deck of items that you can draw from to equip your soldiers, bloodsmen, and huntsmen. Huntsmen can have bows, bloodsmen, and soldiers can have like swords and shields and that kind of stuff. And you get to make unique units for your Kingsguard. Additionally, you also have the heroes, and this is one aspect that I haven't played yet. You can play as a single hero instead of a faction. So if you only want to control one unit, this is how you would play here. So you could play as Princess Breda, as the Plant Man, as Haglar the Ghostly, as Wester the Bold, Thox the Elusive, Larvok the Skullbreaker, Kirkorg the Lord of Corruption, Furak the Arch Warlock, and then you also have some cards that have a little bit of your special abilities for some of your more complex factions, such as the Eggman, the Beast, and the Kingsguard. But yeah, the heroes are really neat. I was very happy to see this element added to the game because I tend to like factions where in games like this where you don't have to play a whole bunch of different units. And so being able to shrink my focus down to one unit sounds right up my alley. So looking forward to this. I just have not done it yet. Another thing you can do is, so when you play solo, you can mix and match your factions. So you could play the Dargon on the Bowmerk, or you could play the Kingsguard and the Eggman. You could play the Beast and the Kingsguard. You can play a hero and a faction. So you could play Furak and the Dargon versus Kirkorg and the Bowmerk. You could also introduce another hero you could have Larvok. So each one of these options has its own AI enemy deck. And so you could play as your own faction versus two AI. You could play solo. I could play as Furak and Dargon. My buddy could play as Thox, and we could play against Kirkorg and the Bowmerk, the Alder King, and Larvok if we wanted to. Tons and tons of different options and different ways to play the game. Almost all of the modes can be played cooperatively. You can play them solo, or you can play competitively. And I really do appreciate a game that has a lot of options like that. You can also add in your own house rules. It's a really simple game. And because of that, I think it lends itself well to house rules. That was actually kind of a combination of points 2 and 3. Point 2 was going to be the options, and point 3 was going to be the combination of factions, actions, action cards, and item cards. Because again, once you start taking those combinations of different factions, different heroes that are working together or against each other, and then you start adding in the different action cards and all of the different items, then you get even more crazy and wacky combinations that adds even more variety to your game. One of the other things that you have in the options section is each of the adventure modes. So you have an adventure mode for each expansion, Kings and Heroes and Beasts and Eggmen. And then you also have your adventure mode for the base game, which is the Underground Adventure. Each one of those has a bonus adventure called either the Will of the King, the Will of the Eggman, or the Will of the Ancients from the base game. And these are basically random adventure modes, where when you uncover one of these story tokens, you will roll 2d6 and then you will consult this chart And within the book, there are tables that you will roll on for different kinds of traps. So you might have traps there, trap table 1, trap table 2, trap table 3, events 1, and events 2. Sometimes you will have, like in the Will of the Ancients, you will have different events there. You will have minor events 1 and 2. You will have trap events 1 and 2. And you will also have treasures. There's a treasure table. Where was that? The underground treasure events on page 21. So you can also discover treasure. So each one of these books has a handful of random charts. And I played one game where I just had these out. It was a competitive game. I was playing against an AI, but I also had these out. And whenever I came across one of those, I would roll on one of these random charts to add just a cool little random element to the game. You know, you want to trigger traps, or you want to find treasure, or have little random events, little random encounters. So you could mix and match all of those into a custom game. You could make up your own scenarios using these chips along with different numbers to put them at different places, and you have to go out and search for, you know, an object, a MacGuffin, go on a quest. So many different options. There are also options in the maps, because we have this underground map. On the reverse side, we have the main outdoor map. Then each of the expansions, the Kingsman expansion comes with a large map of this size, and the Eggman expansion comes with a small map that you attach onto the main map. So yeah, there are just so many options, so many ways to mix and match, so many ways to modify the game for it to really be the kind of game that you want to play. If you want to go head to head, or you want to do something more cooperatively, or something more like an adventure. Another great quality, point number 4, after the combo points 2 and 3 kind of got melded together. That was like the Bowmerk of points there. They congealed together into a super point. But point number 4 is, of course, the artwork, the look of this game. It is bold, it is unique, it is grotesque, and yet it is also somewhat, I feel this really odd sense of compassion for some of these just misshapen monstrosities in this game. I have a feeling that this world is filled with a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And I don't know, it's a weird connection I have to these crazy, odd, weird, freakish creatures. And I don't get that from a lot of different games, but there is something about Robert Lemon's art that is both grotesque and compassionate. I don't know. It's very odd. It's a very odd feeling, but I love the look of his world. I love the creation of it. I like being in it. If you are looking for something, if you miss that feel of Gamma World, or that feel of the old RPG after the bomb, I think Battle of the Ancients and Dark Venture can give you something that is close to that feeling. Point number 5 is going to be a couple of complaints. I think that the small rule books, while they look pretty cool, I like that they fit in your hand, I like that they fit easily in the book and they don't take up a lot of space. I feel like they could be maybe half as big, or not half as, add 50% to the size. So the rule books could use more visual illustrations, I think. I think that would make learning the game, learning some of its intricacies a little easier. I feel like some of the information, because they're trying to cram so much information into a little book, it can be a little bit of an issue. It's not as bad as Dark Venture. I thought Dark Venture could have used a lot more information in its rulebook. I think this is actually a simpler game than Dark Venture, at least on the surface. The complexity in this game exists in all of the asymmetric powers of the factions. And so those are actually covered pretty well in the flip side of Scenario Book B. You will get a faction guide. There's also somebody writing faction guides on BGG right now that are highly, highly valuable. Another one of really my only major complaint about the game itself is gathering resources. I think it's not concrete enough. So there are only a few resources that you can actually gather on the board. The main ones are wood, water, and ore. And the book actually says, and let's actually read it verbatim here so you can understand. Let's see here, gathering resources. All right, for a resource to be collected in a particular space, players must agree that the space could contain within reason the particular resource to be collected. In a skirmish game, in a competitive game like this, I think that the rules should be more concrete. I think that spaces should be clearly marked with you can gather wood and ore here. The water is clearly marked. Water looks like water. Okay, I know where I can gather water. But to agree that certain spaces are rocks or not. This is definitely a rock, but are these little things rocks there? Probably. So I guess you could get ore from just about anywhere. It says you can get wood from inside buildings because of furniture and stuff. And there's also wood out here. You can gather wood from trees. But I don't know, is this wood there? Is that a piece of wood or debris? Is this cave? Does this constitute as an indoor? Is this indoors? There's a door there, but there's no door over here. So can I gather wood anywhere in here or only on these 3 squares? Is this a wood floor in this building? Can I gather wood from anywhere in here? It's a little nebulous. I wish that there was just a better way to actually signify, to actually show where I can pick up certain resources. Because there are only 3 basic resources, I think a little tiny letter in each corner for like a W for water, an O for R, and I guess something else for wood, maybe an H2O, a W for wood, and an O for ore. In each of the corners might have been good, or if they were maybe color-coded, depending on which resource you could get in each square, I think that would be a solution. There are 2 other resources that you can get, but they are pretty simple. Meat, only certain factions can gather meat, and that's after you have successfully killed a unit in combat. And then there is gold as well. And gold can be gathered anywhere where there is a rock, anywhere where there is ore, but you only gather gold on a roll of a 6. And that is the second thing I'm not too hot on gathering resources, is it is completely random. You spend a couple action dice, and then you roll a d6, and you have a 50-50 chance of gathering that resource. Because the Dargon, their ability to survive is entirely contingent on their ability to gather resources, you could have a few turns in a row where you are spending all of your actions trying to gather resources and just not hitting that 50-50 chance on the d6. I think there should be a way, we forgot to talk about this, but genetic memory is a way that you can transform unused action dice into chips and store those for future turns. I think there should be a way where you could trade in 3 genetic memory tokens for a certain element, for a certain resource, if you have not been able to gather that resources through the rolling of dice. Because I could see somebody playing the Dargon in a competitive game and just not having that luck and not being able to bolster their forces and not being able to execute their strategy because they just were not able to gather that resource. But that's really my only main complaint about the game is in the resources and how it's a little nebulous on the board. It's not very clear where you can actually gather some resources, and it being contingent upon that roll of a d6. But overall, I am greatly enjoying my time with Battle of the Ancients. I am liking it a lot more than I thought I was going to like it. It has enough of a narrative pull. It has enough interesting things going on that it satisfies my desire for adventure while also being a fun but simple tactical skirmish game. So, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed taking this look at Battle of the Ancients. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.